Hello! Welcome back
Hello!
to Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I'm Damon Martin.
And hello, I'm Patrick Gara. Hello!
And Patrick with a massive new horror film coming up very soon, 28 years later. We couldn't think of a better time than to tackle the original film from 2002 that I found out today we had both actually saw in the theater because we're old men. 28 days later.
Yes, Damon, released in June of 2002, 28 days later, starring the likes of Christopher Eccleston as Major Henry West, Brendan Gleeson as Frank, Megan Burns as Hannah, and, oh gosh, I got the whole list here, Damon, don't I? Naomi Harris as Selena, and Cillian Murphy, Oscar winner Cillian Murphy as Jim. As you mentioned, Damon, written by Alex Garland and directed by Danny Boyle with a budget of just $8 million. And a worldwide gross of $74 million. That seems criminally low, by the way, for such a seminal film, Damon, 28 days later.
So I mentioned that we both saw this in the theater, and because I remember distinctly seeing two zombie, I know they're infected, but zombie films, let's just call it what it is. I remember distinctly seeing two zombie films in the theater around this era. One was the Dawn of the Dead remake, which was by Zack Snyder and, of course, written by James Gunn. A lot of people don't know James Gunn wrote that movie. And then this movie, which was Alex Garland and Danny Boyle. And I remember loving both of these films. Like that, I'll be honest, like I grew up enjoying George Romero films. I've mentioned on the show before, the first horror film I really remember seeing as a child and it affected me was Night of the Living Dead. That will always hold a special place in my heart. But these two movies, Dawn of the Dead and 28 Days Later, really made me a zombie fan because they were so unlike anything I'd ever seen before. And the unique way in to 28 Days Later, which, by the way, just so I can throw it out there, it is full spoilers. This movie is 20 some odd years old. We're not holding back on
earmuffs, kids.
28 Days Later was so unique where, you know, because it had similarities to even Dawn of the Dead, the fast moving zombies, you know, modern take on the zombie story. But I love the intricacies of the story, which is so simple. And infected, you know, they were doing animal testing, which is awful. And these apes, chimps were infected with this rage virus. These animal activists come in to free them. The animals attack, and then the rage virus spreads. And within 28 days, the world has been basically wiped out from the earth, and there's just little small pockets of humanity still surviving. It's not a complicated concept, but the execution of this movie is brilliant.
I really think you mentioned Dawn of the Dead too, and I remember these are two really, really memorable theater experiences for me. Dawn of the Dead being very different. It was, I think I've described it before as like a raucous party. I remember that night. I remember like this is back in the day before you had assigned seating in theaters, which I prefer assigned seating, just to be clear. But we were all packed into this theater to the point that there were like people like standing on the sides, like up by the, like I don't even know how they let that happen. Like it was clearly just like one of those wild Friday nights. And I remember people just cheering and shouting and just the whole place was fucking rocking because like it was just it was a really fun movie to watch. It just was. And then there was a very different tone with 28 Days Later. And I remember seeing it at this theater. We used to have this mall downtown San Diego called Horton Plaza. And they had a really weird movie theater like embedded in the mall. And so you wouldn't see, it was a whole different experience, completely different than anything else. And I remember getting out of 28 Days Later, like almost shell shocked. And I was and by the way, it says released in 2003 for the United States, probably 2002 for the UK. So I don't know I'm not quite sure what year it was, but I know I was in my young 20s. And I just came out of there going like, holy shit, what did I just see? And it was heavy. It was stylistically very bold. I think I was either about to end film school or I just ended film school. I can't quite remember. But I just thought to myself, like, what the fuck did I just watch? In the best way possible. And I was like, I think movies, the possibilities are endless after watching 28 Days Later. Because of the way that Danny Boyle and Alex Garland like shaped this story. And you mentioned like growing up with zombie movies. You know, these two movies, when I think about Dawn of the Dead and 28 Days Later, they really are our zombie movies. Like all the other ones we grew up with. Like I even think of like Tom Savini's remake of Night of the Living Dead was still 1992 or something. I was a little kid. You know, like it was something I stumbled upon. It wasn't something I sought out. I sought out Dawn of the Dead. I sought out 28 Days Later, and they defined my young adulthood. Whereas all these other movies were things that I think you and I were just exposed to, this was something we went out and sought out, and it was speaking to us. And Danny Boyle at that time was known as sort of a bold filmmaker who takes a lot of chances, and taking the chance of sort of shooting this on DV cameras and shooting it more frenetically with lesser known actors. Like he didn't have to. He had enough credibility at that point that he could have cast people that were of note, and he probably could have got a bigger budget. He probably could have shot it with film cameras, the entire thing. And he was just like, I want to try this because I have like these deep feelings about where the world is going, and also based on Alex Garland's book. And the two of them together, that duo specifically, and I bring them up because 28 years later is coming out. We're on the heels of that. They're getting back together to talk about 28 years later. And I'm very fascinated about what that's going to look like. And we'll talk about that later in the show, because what we saw with 28 Days Later back in 2003 was a commentary on where the world seemed to be going according to these two storytellers. The idea of a rage virus was very specific. By the way, if people don't know, these aren't zombies. They're not dead people. They're infected with something. They're not dead and thirsting for brains. They are infected with a ravenous, basically an extreme form of rabies that causes them to just rip somebody to shreds. And then their body is going through so much various forms of decay, but they're not dead. They're just literally flesh-hungry psychopaths. And I think it was a very, very sharp commentary on where they felt the world was going at the time. Can you imagine like what 28 years later is going to say about all of this? Like, I don't know, Damon, like, were you, to me, I was hit by a truck when I saw this movie in the theaters. What say Damon Martin? He's 20 something years old. He steps out of that movie theater that night. Does he go, holy shit, what the fuck was that?
So I don't want to just repeat what you said, but I had a very similar experience with Dawn of the Dead and 28 Days Later. Dawn of the Dead, I remember going to see Dawn of the Dead. The theater was absolutely packed, sold out. And I remember, just like you, we got in, and I remember sitting in like the upper deck on like one of those like side aisles, because that's all the seats that were left. So I'm on like the upper left-hand side, kind of looking down at the screen. That's how high up we were. And the place was packed. I mean, it was sold out. And it was a very raucous, fun experience. And a lot of things in Dawn of the Dead is a James Gunn script. Like it's got its serious moments, but there is levity, there is comedy, there is, it's a very multifaceted movie. And I love that movie, by the way. I love Dawn of the Dead.
I do too.
28 Days Later, while there are a couple of moments of, enjoyment, I guess, for lack of a better word, it is a very serious movie. It is a very grounded movie. It is a very dour movie. And so I remember sitting in the theater for that one, and that one was like a gut punch. I'm not saying I love Dawn of the Dead. I absolutely adore that movie, but I'm saying like this one was like a gut punch, And I remember leaving the theater and saying, I can't explain what I just saw, but I know I saw something that was of a genre I'm familiar with, because it's, I know they're not technically zombies, but let's just say zombies for lack of a better word, infected rage zombies, whatever. But I just saw something I'd never seen before. Even though it's the same genre, I had never seen something quite like this. The way it was shot, the way the cinematography was in a city like London. And I'm sure you remember this, all the rumors that spread afterwards. I remember hearing about this was all done with guerrilla filmmaking. They didn't have permission to shoot in this. No, that's not true. They did. They had permission.
They totally had permission.
Yeah. And they you know, they've told stories where Danny Boyle said like they had like 45 minutes between like dawn and an hour later to shoot all their London scenes, and they would close it off, and they said they actually had people, commuters, piling up to get on the streets, heckling them while they're filming, calling them all sorts of curse words because they wanted to be able to get out in the streets. And they said they had like 45 minutes each morning to shoot these shots. So it was not totally guerrilla filmmaking. They did it very legally. But I remember that rumor. Like, they did this all guerrilla filmmaking. They had no permission. I'm sure you remember that rumor.
Yeah, I remember that.
But then so here we are more than 20 years later. And I just saw, like, recently I saw a film that our friend Sid Horror Chronicles had suggested, a movie called Clown. I think I mentioned this on the show when we did our Clown in the Cornfield episode. And I had never seen it before. I thought it was a blast. I had a good time watching it. The director was John Watts, who, of course, has gone on to make billions upon billions of dollars for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, directing several Spider-Man films. He was supposed to direct the final Fantastic Four movie coming up pretty soon. I was like, wow, cool, this guy got his start in horror. Can you wrap your head around the fucking talent that was in it? Because yes, Danny Boyle made. I don't know if you have you seen The Beach, the movie The Beach that's based on.
Oh no, I used to go to every Danny Boyle movie.
Yeah,
I'm a big
Leonardo
Danny
DiCaprio, fan. Tilda Swinton. Like I remember seeing that movie. That movie was like a fever dream.
Yeah.
But that's still very early on in his career. Now, of course, Danny Boyle went on to win an Oscar for Slumdog Millionaire. He made Trainspotting. Alex Garland, of course, went on to make Ex Machina. He went on to make, just going to Civil War last year, Warfare this year. He made Men. Let's just set that one aside. He's made a lot of big movies. And then Cillian Murphy was like 2 films into his career, and they were both like kind of like indie films. Him, Naomi Harris goes on to have a career. Christopher Eccleston is one of my favorite, like, that guy actors. I love Christopher Eccleston, and he's great in this movie. It's an embarrassment of riches. Christopher Eccleston, of course, he was in Doctor Who. Him and Brendan Gleeson, who, of course, Brendan Gleeson's a very, very well-known actor. They were the only named actors. Now, this is a very small cast. Technically, you're talking about maybe about 10 to 12 people when you get into soldiers in the last third of the movie. But really, you're talking about 4 primary characters. You're talking about, Cillian Murphy. You're talking about Naomi Harris. You're talking about Brendan Gleeson, and then Megan Burns, who plays Hannah. 3 of the 4 are like award-winning, really well-established actors. And the really crappy part, not to bring the mood down here, Patrick, I don't know if you read any interviews or you did your research on this. Megan Burns, the girl who played Hannah, she basically stopped acting because of the reception to this movie. People said she was terrible. She ruined the movie. I'm like, I thought she was perfectly good, but she's like a 12-year-old girl. Fuck off. Yeah. Like, I mean, we always, like, we fully admit on this show, like, we're like, kids actors can make or break your movie, but we always try to go out of our way never to be overly cruel to a child actor because they are a child actor. Like, she basically quit acting because of the reception of this movie. But setting that aside, like, this movie is ridiculous. Like, this is an embarrassment of riches for what at the time? Nobody knew. Nobody knew Cillian Murphy was going to go on to become an Oscar-winning actor. Nobody knew that Danny Boyle would go on to become an Oscar-winning director. Like, this is ridiculous for a horror movie. Like, that just doesn't happen.
And especially like what the movie is. Now I had back then I had no grasp of who Alex Garland was. I didn't know about his books. I didn't know that he was like kind of this sci-fi aficionado in any capacity. But it starts there. It starts with a great storyteller and then a great executor of stories, which is Danny Boyle. Like those two guys coming together. They're also young in their careers. Danny had a few movies under his belt, some good ones too, like not just any old movies, like pretty good movies. And so he could have been making more serious fare. He could have gone on to make English rom-coms that do tremendous amounts of money and are very successful. By the way, he ended up doing a rom-com that's one of the few that I really like. He did Yesterday, which I actually really like as a rom-com. But Danny's a really creative guy who just wants to think differently. Alex Garland, also known for that. It was like this collision of very perfect storytellers. And then how they wanted to do it, Damon. I forgot just how fucking like punk this movie is. And I think it takes young filmmakers to do that. Like I think of Talk to Me, and I think of what the Philippou brothers did with Talk to Me, or I think of what Julie Ducournau did with Raw and Titan. You know what I mean? These movies that are very edgy, very left field, very strange. They don't follow the rules.
Coralie Fairgeau with The Substance and Revenge. Those two films.
Coralie did Revenge when she was a little bit younger, and then she did The Substance. And I think The Substance is very fucking punk. Like it's very counterculture and interesting. And that's the kind of people you were dealing with Danny Boyle and Alex Garland, who have gone on to just become ridiculously successful. I argue Alex is even more prolific than Danny. You know, he's out there writing, directing shows, and he doesn't stop. He seems to just constantly be doing stuff. But the execution at that age, for them to just go, let's just get a bunch of fucking DV cams and shoot it that way. And Danny's like state of mind was, I wanted the apocalypse to have a look to it. I wanted to have this feel. And, you know, DV cams at the time they were in their infancy. And you look at it now, and I look at the look of that movie, you wouldn't call it like a beautiful movie, but it weirdly is. But now like that kind of birthed like the whole, it's called like the analog horror. Like analog horror is like tape horror now, which is like, most of it looks just like fucking 28 Days Later, truth be told, which is not a movie from the 90s, not a movie made of videotape. It's a movie made with digital video. It's hauntingly beautiful. It's also just like in your face, like rapid cuts. They use like, you know, these shutter techniques that make it like a little bit like staticky for whenever the rage monsters are coming after you. They have a different feel. Like they just experimented with what they were doing, and it so fucking pays off. Like I can't begin to tell you, Damon, how this movie would have failed miserably in the wrong hands. With the same, with the same intention for execution. Like, oh, we'll just shoot it on video. You know, Blood Fart Lake comes to mind. I go, that's what happens in the wrong hands. It turns into that. And some people like Blood Fart Lake, and that's fine and it's valid. When it was in the hands of these guys, the intention behind it was so striking. It was so heavy. And I don't know when you want to start talking about the story necessarily, but I think it's like it was this perfect meld of visual style, very intentional visual style, with very, very poignant, simple, but really effective storytelling.
Well, real quick, I want to mention about the look, because I read a lot of interviews, you know, leading up to doing this podcast with Danny Boyle, and I read there's an oral history of 28 Days Later that came out a couple years ago, and they were talking about their choice to use the DV cams. And basically Danny Boyle said he wanted to make it look grainy and almost burned out, because that's what the world was supposed to look like. The world was supposed to look ravaged and burned out. And so he wanted his camera effect to look like that. I mean, such a simple thing. And I watched the movie. I've seen this. So I mentioned this before we recorded. I saw this movie in the theater, and then I know I bought it on DVD. Actually, I still have my original DVD copy of 28 Days Later sitting behind me here. And then it was on cable. Now, it went out of circulation more recently, because I know everyone kind of panicked and freaked out because they just recently re-released it on digital with the new movie 28 Years Later coming out. But it wasn't available for a long time. If you didn't have the DVD, you did not own 28 Days Later, because it was not available to buy or watch online, which is why I'm still such a champion of physical media. But I remember watching this in the theater and then probably seeing this like 10 times over the next like 5 years, like between my DVD copy and then seeing it on HBO, Showtime, one of the cable networks. And then I hadn't watched this movie since then. So it came out in 2002, 2003. I probably watched it a dozen times between then and maybe 2010. And that's 15 years ago. That's probably the last time I really sat down and watched this movie. Now, sitting down and watching it now under what we always say the critical eye, I remembered them. Like as soon as it started, I remembered the movie. I was like, oh, okay, this is like slipping into a warm bath. Like I knew exactly what I was getting into, and I remembered all the beats. I remembered all the story. I remembered all the characters. Knew everything. I knew where everything was going. So the familiarity was there, but then watching it visually was just so stunning. From the scene where Jim's in the hospital to Jim's in the church to when Jim gets attacked on the street and you see the two people come out with the Molotov cocktails, chucking at the rage zombies. The rage zombies in flames running at them. Everything was just so visceral. And then there's just something about the way this movie is shot between the action moments, and then Danny Boyle and the cinematographer have a real unique way of really using close-ups in this movie to express like a certain moment, like when Frank gets the blood in his eye and he turns into the rage monster, or when you're in the house with the soldiers and Jim cuts loose the one rage zombie and it goes running through the house and everything is just like right in the eyes. And I love that, the bloodshot red eyes. The way this movie is shot is just ridiculous. Like it's just, this is a totally different movie in somebody else's hands. And every filmmaker has their own unique style, and I really appreciate that Danny Boyle wanted to shoot this film the way it is, because when you really break it down, and you said let's talk about the story, this isn't the most complex story. Most zombie movies are not. Like, we talked about serial killer movies last week with Dangerous Animals. I said generally serial killer, you can really pack a lot into a serial killer movie, but the general plot is always kind of the same. Serial killer, will they get caught or will they not get caught? I know that's boiling it down and really making it simplistic, but that is kind of what happens in a serial killer movie. In a zombie movie, it's humans trying to survive the zombies. That, you know, and that's the simplest plot you can get. Now, in some versions, you might get, well, are they trying to cure? Are they trying to, are they trying to make it to a certain place? Are they trying to find a certain person? But ultimately, it's humanity trying to survive the zombie apocalypse. So it's not the most intricate plot. And I'm not saying that because I don't like the story. I love the story. But I'm saying it is so simple. But the introduction of Jim in that hospital bed, where you see a whole lot of Cillian Murphy, him waking up after the cold open, which the cold open is brilliant. I mean, the animal activist breaking into the room, the scientists pleading with them not to let the chimps out, and they're basically like, fuck you, dude. And then that chimp comes out and attacks the girl, and then all hell breaks loose. 28 days later, you find Jim in the bed, all the tubes and everything, his catheter, all that stuff. He's laying there butt-ass naked. He wakes up, and he's alone. And he wanders out into this hospital. He's alone. Nobody's there. Now, this is like, this first, like, I don't know what it is, 20 minutes probably, where until you get
10 to 15, yeah.
When you get to the church and you get to Selena and the other guy.
Yeah.
It's such a disconcerting period of film because you don't totally know what's going on yourself. You are in Jim's position because you see the rage chimps and you see them attack the people, but we don't know what that really means at that point. And then when you wake up with Jim in the hospital and he's wandering out there and he's just all alone, you're not even seeing bodies on the floor. There's nothing. It's just empty, desolate. Like they snapped the fingers like in The Leftovers and everyone disappeared. It is such a brilliant way into this movie. And then when he goes in that church, it is so visceral. It is so utterly visceral. When you see that priest, he goes, Father? And the guy just comes running. It is such a brilliant way into this movie and a brilliant bit of storytelling, which I think that entire 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is, there's like, what, 10 lines of dialogue? Maybe?
And 7 of them are hello.
Yeah. And the rest of it is in the opening scene.
Right.
Because it's them in the animal activist breaking into the science lab. It's not Jim. Jim's alone.
Yeah.
So you have to you're figuring things out with Jim. And I love that because you're so disconnected. You're like, I have no idea what's going on. You're like, we saw the opening. We know there's some kind of weird these chimps are attacking, and the guy said they're infected. What does that mean? What happened? Where is everybody? You are leaving in Jim's eyes, and it's a really like terrifying moment.
There's so many layers to like the execution of the movie, and you say visceral, and obviously like image wise, it's a very visceral movie, but emotionally, it's very visceral, right? Because you, like you say very brilliantly there, you're putting the audience in the perspective of Jim, which is he wakes up alone, not alone just anywhere, alone in one of the busiest, most bustling cities on the planet. I don't know if you've ever been to London. I most recently went, and it's like it's crowded nonstop, 24 hours a day. There's throngs of people everywhere you go. So if you wake up alone in a world and you scream out and you're crying out for someone to answer, and no one does, and these stark images of just Jim walking the empty streets of London, walking past Big Ben with no one around. I mean, that's not a thing. That's not a thing. There's never not 1,000 people in front of Big Ben.
And daytime too. Just want to throw that
in the middle of the day. Like it's just it's this stark loneliness, right? So just on an emotional level, you're like, what if I found myself like so very lonely and so intensely isolated in an extreme way, and then the first moment of him experiencing that he's not alone is walking into a church of all places. And it's piles of bodies. I mean, stacks and stacks of bodies. He makes the noise, and then the two bodies pop up, and it's fucking really crazy. And then the priest, who you would normally assume you'd find solace from, is ravenously coming to attack you, and it creates this chaotic moment. And then he meets these survivors. He meets he meets Selena, and I think the other guy was Mark, if I believe is correct.
Yes, yeah, Mark. Yeah, you're right.
And they're out there, and they've figured out how to survive these last 28 days. And he finds some normalcy in just this insanity. And things happen. Mark gets taken out. He's stuck with Selena. And then what happens? They're again roaming through kind of the isolated streets, trying to keep safe from what's going on. And then they see those blinking lights up in a tower block, and they go, there's someone up there. We should go find them. They find Frank and his daughter.
Hannah.
What's his daughter's name? Hannah. Thank you, Frank and Hannah. I'm terrible with names. If no one has noticed, I'm super bad with names. So they find Frank and Hannah, and they build a family. Really, like they kind of, like the first half of the movie is Jim finding people, like going from being isolated to finding family. And you know very little about Jim. You know that he had a mom and a dad, and he misses them dearly, but you don't get a lot of what it was. It was just like, Matt, that's probably all he had before this was his mom and dad, probably some friends. And that was kind of it for his life. His life was kind of just getting started, and now the world seems to just have ended while he was asleep. And he finds these people. He finds Selena and Hank and
Hannah and
Frank and Hannah. Sorry, I need to just forget about names. He finds these people, and right when they start to settle into a life together, chaos ensues yet again. You know that the gut wrenching scene, Damon, where Frank gets the blood in his eye, and he has to like shout at his daughter, "Get away from me!" and all like your heart is broken. Because even Jim and Selena had to acknowledge, like, look at, like, there is something to live for in this terrible world. There's these two have each other, and so maybe we can have more than we thought. Maybe it's not as hopeless as we thought. There's this air of hope with Frank and Hannah that gets dashed in a moment, in a split second, and they know what they have to do. They have to kill Frank. Instead, they don't kill Frank. These soldiers kill Frank, and then the movie changes. Damon, this is what I love about Alex Garland. I know he's hit or miss for both of us, I believe, if we're keeping tally. But what he did here next was really brilliant, because it was like, here's where hope lies, and then Damon, you enter the soldiers, and hope just disintegrates into absolute just dire, dour madness.
I spoke during Dangerous Animals. I used the two-word phrase "false hope" as a key element in that movie. You think you have things figured out, and then the rug gets pulled out from under you. That happens in this movie as well, and it's a very hopeless feeling movie. I mean, Jim desperately wants to find his parents. He gets to their house and finds they've committed suicide. And that note, please don't wake up. God, I mean, when you read that note and it says, we left you sleeping. We're going to join you now. Please don't wake up. Oh my God. Like, just imagine that feeling. Like you've been in this hospital for a month in a coma after you get hit by a car as a courier. And you wake up, you try to go find your parents, and they've killed themselves. And they're saying, we're going to see you on the other side. Please don't wake up, son. Oh my God. And then he makes the ill-fated error of lighting a candle to look at photos, and the zombies crash through and kill Mark. Well, they cut Mark, and then Hannah literally hacks him to pieces with a machete. And then you go to find Frank and Hannah, and a little bit of hope again, right? You got this tower, they've survived, but then you find out that it hasn't rained in 10 days. They're out of water, and survival's not really much of an option there. They got to get out of there. And Frank hears this radio message. If you can find us north of Manchester, we're out there. Come find us. We're here. Frank's like, well, listen, we got to try. So he jump in his taxi, and the taxi ride between there and when Frank dies is probably the most hopeful time in this entire movie when they're driving outside. I mean, they have to stop and replace a spare tire, but I mean, outside of that, they go to the market and they're going and enjoying finding some food and different things like that. They have a night out under the stars and they sleep, although, Jim has a nightmare, but again, kind of like a family atmosphere together. They get to the outpost, and it's abandoned. It's torn apart and obliterated. And Frank is just enraged because he's like, I need to save my daughter. I don't really care about myself. I need to save Hannah. And then he gets the drop of blood, as you mentioned. Soldiers come in, save the day, but they don't save the day. Because what the overarching theme, and I talk about the simplicity sort of serial killer movies, the simplicity sort of zombie movies, the overarching theme of almost every zombie movie is that the dead can rise from the grave, they can come back to eat your brains, or in this case, the rage zombies just want to tear you apart and spew blood on you. But they're not the real enemy. The real enemy is humanity. And that message gets conveyed in one of the most chilling scenes in this entire film. They've been rescued. They took hot showers. They're about to eat a meal together. Like this is like everything. They're safe. They got minefields. They got lights. They got guns. They got bombs. They're good. They're safe. And then the major pulls Jim aside and he says, Jim, I want you to be with us, but you have to know, I told my men there would be women. We put out the call to lure women because 10 days ago, or whatever number he gives, I found Jones with a gun in his mouth. And he's like, what is the point? And he's like, I promised him women. Then you realize what this actually was. It was a trap to bring women, to basically enslave them into sexual slavery with 10 or 12 soldiers. Now, they never say that explicitly. He just says, I promised them women. It doesn't take you a genius to figure out what he's talking about. It is so horrific. Like that to me, honestly, I'm not getting into spoilers. I'm not getting into categories. That's honestly the most scary scene in this movie. That's the scariest scene. When he says that to Jim, your heart stops because you're like, oh, fuck. Like,
we're in a real bad place.
Humanity in these situations is what you really have to fear.
Oh my God. Yeah. And really it becomes a fight for their life against people of all things, right? They thought they found sanctuary, and the sad truth and the very what's the word I'm looking for? Prophetic, nature of this story is that like, when it all breaks down, can you even trust the people that are supposed to help you? You know, like they are base too. They are animals too, and they may go animal on you. And these guys were, just planning to go animal on this group. They really don't need Jim around. He's kind of in the way. What they really just need is Hannah and Selena. So it becomes a fight for their lives. It becomes a chance, and Jim is not the most capable guy. He has to find his way into kind of fooling them, and that becomes the game of cat and mouse. Is like, I'm running out of time before they do something terrible to these women. How do I save the day? And he hits the siren to get the infected to come towards them. He releases Mailer, who they're studying, which is an homage to Dawn of the Dead, or is it Day of the Dead? I think it might.
Day of the Dead. Day of the Dead.
Yeah, it was Day of the Dead. Yes, an homage to Day of the Dead, where they're studying one of the soldiers who's turned, and he releases him on them, and basically he uses the rage against them. Like if you're gonna have rage, that's kind of the moral of it, right? If you're gonna have rage, use it against those who wish you harm. Those who are the evildoers. Like find the rage to beat evil. Basically, if you're going to have to use it, it's a human emotion. Find it to beat the evil. Find it to beat those who wish to do terrible things to humanity, because ultimately that's what's worth saving. It's humanity's worth saving. Is I think the moral of the story. And where this movie, I think, it ultimately lands is like, we can't give up hope. We cannot give up, because we know there are people who are going to do terrible things. We can't avoid it. It's going to happen. Even in the worst of situations, when we should just be there to help each other out, it's not going to happen. Some people are going to take advantage. They're out there, and you have to keep hope alive. And so it's really poignant, and it's very simple. Like, there's nothing about it that they don't bash you over the head with anything in this movie. They do it very simply and very effectively and very viscerally. This movie's about panic. This movie's about immediacy and getting in there and being faced with an impossible task and getting right to it and not fucking around. And that makes for like kind of a heart-stopping experience that it really sticks with you. That part of, I forgot just how much the end of that movie really stunned me.
It's really a powerful final 20-25 minutes of this movie. And I mentioned, like, every zombie movie is similar to this. You think about Night of the Living Dead. They've defeated the zombies, and it's humans who end up killing the guy who saved the day, basically. That becomes a whole conversation on race relation and racism and things like that. That spawned out of that movie. Think about Dawn of the Dead. They're surviving in the mall. Then these bikers show up, and it's mayhem, and it's not the zombies, it's these other people. Day of the Dead, it's the soldiers who are trying to survive, trying to find a cure, but then the soldiers have kind of gone bad. And that always goes. You think about The Walking Dead. It's the governor, and then it's Negan, and then it's the humans that are, not say the zombies aren't a part of it, but it's the humans that really turn into like the real shitheels. And here, once again, like, you're trying to survive these ravenous freaks who are just running and trying to infect you and bite you and tear you apart. And yet it's another human that you truly have to fear, these soldiers. And I think what makes this movie even more terrifying when you really sit down and think about it is that this is 28 days in.
Yeah.
This isn't 28 years, and we're going to talk about like our expectations for that movie in a little bit, but like, you see The Walking Dead, like when The Walking Dead started, I don't know how much you watch The Walking Dead, and I read the comics too, but like, that takes place over several years. Like, things continuously kind of get worse and worse and more, 28 days in, and the soldiers are already like, well, we're not going to make it. What can we need to bring women in for, enslave them into sexual slavery here because we need to survive. 28 days, and civility is gone. Gone. Yeah. I think that spoke to me so powerfully with this movie because it is a common theme, as I said, like, sometimes it's just, you got shit, we want your shit, we're going to take your shit. That's as simple as it boils down in some zombie movies. Fine. This one is a little more complex and a little more atrocious and horrible because of what they want to do to the women. We're 28 days in. 28
Yeah.
days. And they're just like, yeah, we need to kidnap and enslave these women because, we need to repopulate the world. They're not trying to repopulate the world. We all know what
No.
they're actually trying to do. That is what struck, and not that I didn't get the first time around, but it really struck me this. I'm like, this all happens in a span of a month.
Yeah,
and society has just fallen apart.
And I think it's really prophetic. I really do.
It is 100%.
And I'm not going to pretend like Alex Garland was the first one to figure that out. I think I remember The Road very specifically saying that like there was something to the effect of like within 2 weeks you could hear people chanting at fires in the middle of the night. Like they were already like devolving into tribal like behavior very, very quickly. Like when it's very clear all hope is lost. And so you run into that and it's ugly, it's nasty. What's funny is you bring up like the real enemy being other humans during these zombie movies. The one movie that isn't really like that is Dawn of the Dead, Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead. Really, it is just a matter of like, can we all get together to fight the horde of zombies because the personality clashes, which feels very James Gunn to me. It's like, can we just all get along and like make this work together? And the answer is no, it's going to be really hard. It's actually going to be very hard to do that. But there is no like outside human threat. It's literally just the threat of the zombies coming at them. So it's interesting that those two were very formative for us in our 20s, but they say completely different things. But they also say the same thing, which is like how you get through the hardest, most difficult, most dire situations is with each other, and not just with each other, but with humanity on your side, with empathy on your side, with good in your intentions, because this other group that outgunned them, was stronger than them, could fight better than them, they had devolved so poorly, so quickly, and for base desire, like and for just ravenous, like self satisfaction. Like all the worst parts of humanity were in that group of soldiers. Just because they, as a group think, they were like, what if we just did awful things to get what we want? Whereas this smaller group with Selena and Jim and Frank and Hannah, they were just like, what if we just made a little family and, and laughed and had a good time together? Ultimately, that's the good versus the bad in this movie. It's very simple. None of this is hard to follow. It's just wrapped in this very visceral, very action-packed, very, very snappy, very punk, very like weird angles, like quick edits, all this stuff to just convey that life is so damn chaotic. It's fucking masterwork.
It reminds me a lot of Stephen King's work, because have you ever seen the book or the TV show for Under the Dome? People get trapped under this invisible dome in a town, and within like days, it's turned into like tribalism, and like they're killing people and trying to rule the roost and survive, and it's just like a matter of just like, I think it's like 6 days. And then you think about The Mist, which is one of our shared favorite movies. Mm-hmm. The Mist rolls in, and within like 3 days, everyone's split off into groups and they're trying to survive, and there's that great moment where the woman says, "You don't have very much faith in humanity, do you?" And the guy goes, "None whatsoever." he's like, "I know." And I think that's what this is an exploration of, and that's why I said, like, when you realize like how short of a span of time things just really fall apart, you don't have to take a philosophical approach to this movie. You can just enjoy it for the zombiness of it all, and the action and just the incredible shots and the dialogue and the story, but without digging too deep into it. And that's fine, by the way. I say that all the time because I hate when everyone's, "Oh, you didn't get the point." There's this deeper. Sometimes I just like to watch a movie. I don't need to know the deeper point.
Yeah.
But this movie does have a deeper point. It's not even, I mean, it's much more on the surface. You should be able to figure it out. But if you don't, that's fine. If you're not like, I just want to see a cool zombie movie, that's fine too. But when you do get into the philosophy of this movie of how quickly the world falls apart and how quickly humanity turns on each other, and it's ugly and it's nasty and it's dirty and it's horrific, because throughout this movie, for all the hopelessness that I mentioned earlier, Jim waking up, not knowing where he's at, and then Mark getting killed, and then Frank getting killed, and then the soldiers being complete shithills. At every turn, something terrible happens, but along the way, Jim finds Selena. they become friends, and more as the movie goes on. Then they find Frank and Hannah, and they've kind of built a little family together. Four of them together, it's something special, something sweet. Obviously, from then on out, it gets kind of worse and worse and worse. But then at the very end, Jim, Selena, and Hannah survive. And for all the hopelessness and all the just atrocities being carried out in this movie and how things seemingly do get worse and worse and worse, there are those elements of hope peppered in there with Jim and Selena and Hannah. And, so I love the layers of this movie because philosophically you could say, man, this movie's got a message. Rage, you see where rage gets us, because rage is a real thing. It may not be an infection, but rage, I'm guilty of it 100. I can't tell you how many times I've been close to a road rage incident and my girlfriend or someone's pulling me back like, they might have a gun. I'm just like, but I really want to get out and just punch that guy. I'm guilty of it. I fully admit I'm guilty of it. And this movie is almost like a cautionary tale of what rage can become. But then also it's the other side, which is what humanity can become. And without any infection whatsoever. When you lose, I can't remember what movie it says this. It may even be The Mist. I can't remember what movie it is, but they say, when you take away 911, you take away phones, you take away electricity, watch what people become. I can't remember what movie that's from, but it's a line from a movie. It's true. 28 days later, these soldiers, these people who are supposed to be there to save people and help people, have turned into base instinct of we need to have sex, and we're willing to do horrible, horrible, atrocious things to do it. That's awful. But then in the end, there's hope again because Selena and Jim and Hannah survive. Did you happen in the lead up to this? Did you happen to read about the two endings?
I watched the two endings. I found them on YouTube. Yeah, I wouldn't watch them. So basically, there was an ending where, because in the movie itself, Jim does get shot. He gets shot by what's his name, Major Henry. So Major Henry shoots him, and then they just cut to them later on. And Jim is healed, and he's with Hannah and Selena, and they're making a life for themselves in the countryside, and also trying to signal for help, because what they have learned is basically the UK has been completely cordoned off because and the virus has been contained there, so they just want their way out of it, and they leave on a hopeful note, basically. The alternate version of it was, or the original, I should say, the original version of it was
in
Jim
the script.
This is what
was in the script.
The plan was Jim was going to get shot, and then they shot this sequence. I don't know if you saw the video. They shot a sequence of Selena taking him into a hospital and her and Hannah desperately trying to save his life, and then he just dies. And then they have that moment out in the countryside together alone without him. And they were just like, that feels, oh no, I'm sorry. They didn't even do that. Well, what they did is the doors just close on them as they make their way. Cause Hannah's like, what do we do now? And she's like, we keep moving. Like, just like when you first met Selena, that was her idea. It was like, you just keep moving. You just keep moving on. The audiences just didn't take to it. They were like, it's too dour. It's like no hope at all. Like, come on, give us some semblance of hope. And so they reshot it with him surviving.
So I want 2 points I want to bring up about this, and every era is different. We've talked about this. You and I, because we're sadists, we enjoy dour endings. We've talked about that. The Mist is a great example. I just brought that up.
One of the greatest
endings of all time. I just watched that again recently. I'm like, oh my god! Every time I watch it, it's just soul crushing. But I love it. A big part of the filming of this movie took place around 9/11. And they were already about midway through filming. They were talking about like when they're in the middle of production, they're going back into like what they call video village, where they have screens set up in their monitors and they're screening the day shots. The dailies is what they call it. They're screening the dailies, and on the news to the side, they're seeing the Twin Towers burning. And they talked about how life changed in that moment because they were filming a movie about the biggest cities in the world becoming empty vessels of death because of the rage virus. And then 9/11 happened, And it truly made people fear being in cities because of that, the atrocity carried on in that day. If it can happen there in the most densely populated city in the world that you think is, I mean, no, I'm not saying safe in the sense of like you don't get mugged or robbed or, crimes don't get carried out in New York City, but like you don't think that planes are going to crash into a building and kill, 5,000 people in one fell swoop. Like that doesn't happen in America. And so they're like, we're filming this movie, and they're in England, of course, but they're like, we're filming this movie, and we just realized the whole world just changed. In the middle of us filming this movie, like people are terrified to be in cities right now. And London was locked down, like everyone, when something, I'm not patting ourselves in the back too much. I'm not getting in that conversation, but it's true to a certain extent. Like, America is the most powerful nation in the world. And when something terrible happens to America, the rest of the world's like, oh shit. Because if it can happen to America, it can happen anywhere, right? Like that was the feeling around 9/11. If it can happen there, it can definitely happen to us. And so they said everything kind of changed. And so when they shot the original ending, the one that Alex Garland wrote, that Jim dies, and it's just Selena and Hannah leaving the hospital, and that was the ending. They just walk out into the world together. I saw an interview with Alex Garland. He said, audiences didn't hate it. They really fucking hated it. Like, they fucking hated it. And he's like, we had to do something because that ruined the movie. Like, he's like, I've never, like, test audiences, everybody. Like, a test audience is where they take a group of people. I don't know what the numbers are. Sometimes it's 60 people, sometimes 100 people. You go and you sign an NDA and you say, I'm going to watch this movie and give you my opinion, and then I can't talk about it because they might make edits, they might make changes. I don't know what the number was with the test audience. So, like, in a test audience, let's say 100, you might get a general opinion, like 80 people agree, like, we don't like the ending. Well, they'll still maybe change it because, like, 80 people really don't like it. 100 people are like, fuck this ending. We hate it. And so, like, we got to change this. And so that's where we get this hopeful ending. Now, you and I have talked about, and I just said, we like those dour endings.
Yes.
Not every time. I'm not saying it has to happen every time. And I think rewatching this and knowing and having seen that other ending, I'm not saying it's a bad ending, but I think given the time and the way this movie played out, especially with the horrific atrocities that were going to be carried out by the soldiers and Jim basically sacking up because he was kind of I don't say coward, I don't use the wrong word coward, but he was the most afraid of anybody because he woke up in this. He had no idea what he was stepping into. Selena had lived this for 28 days, so she'd already kind of had a bit of a hardened side to her. Jim woke up, he's like, what the fuck is going on? When he kills the kid in that convenience store in that gas station, like that's the one person he had to kill. He has not been really exposed to that. So when he goes through and he's like releasing the rage zombies and he's literally like watching them tear apart a soldier, and like at that point he's drilled down to his base instinct of just saving Selena and Hannah. But I think when you think about a 2002 world or 2001 world when this was being filmed during 9/11, I think the audience has got it right. And for that time period, for that story, for this movie, I think they got it right. Because you and I can sit here and say we love a dour ending, and I do.
Sure.
But I think this movie, the way it plays out, especially with Frank and then the soldiers, I think we need Jim to make it. And I think they got it right.
Yeah, I think ultimately they did. If anything, weirdly, when I was watching what they shot, I just felt like it just wasn't up to snuff with the rest of the film. It felt more hurried up, and it could have been recut and re-edited. You can't truly judge it for what it was.
They said they ran out of money, completely out of money. Like they didn't have an ending filmed, and they were out of money. So like everything they shot at that point was like with nothing left.
Yeah, it feels pretty rough, like compared to the rest of the movie, the movie is kind of on purpose very rough. But that particular, I was like, man, this doesn't even match like the kinetic energy of the rest of the movie at all. It was sort of weird. So I was kind of glad they didn't shoot it for that reason, believe it or not. It wasn't necessarily what happened, but they wanted to give the audiences hope. They really did, and they actually ended up shooting the one thing they didn't shoot on DV was the end with the three of them signaling the plane as it flew by. They shot that on 35 millimeter film, so it looks beautiful and smooth and hopeful is basically what they wanted. They wanted to give audiences hope. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Yes, I love a good Dower ending, but there's nothing wrong with the idea of saying, hey, you know what? There is a chance for humanity. Believe me, we need it every now and then. We desperately need to be reminded there is a chance.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, in the right situations, because you can do it the other way where it's just like everything is dour and you're just like, fuck, like you walk away. I've said, like, you walk away from some movies and you're just like, oh my god, like this is just a really depressing, sad movie, and that's okay from time to time. But I think a movie like this that is so much hope and then hope being dashed. It's almost like Jim dying would have just been like, oh man, like I think I kind of would have been in that audience being like, fuck this ending. So and I also I think you always have to remember the time, you know, and I think for better, I mean, like it or not, the fact that this movie was filmed literally in the middle of it being 9/11, that had to affect people, the mood. I remember that mood. I mean, we were alive. We were teens, early 20s, late teens in that era. You remember where you were at in 2001. You remember how much life changed forever. Now, people of this era in 2025 we're so far removed from it. People don't really remember outside of maybe going to the airport and have to take off your shoes, which you didn't have to do before 9/11. But we're almost 25 years past that now, where people have just kind of like, oh, I won't say forgotten. No, I'm not saying it was forgotten, but you've kind of forgotten what it was like in that moment. I remember the day of 9/11, it was a day I was actually having a security system put into my apartment because my apartment got broken into. And I had an ADT guy coming out to install a system, and I had the TV on, and it was muted. And I saw the news break in, and it was like 10 o'clock in the morning, and I was like, what's going on? And I was like, oh, shit. And we watched the news. Me and the ADT guy watched the news together. And the people who broke into my apartment had stolen my TV, and they stole my TV remote. So I had to go to the mall to get a new TV remote because there was the cable company had an office in the mall. So I was going to the mall to get a new remote. And you walked in the mall, and it felt like 28 days later. Everything was closed. Like there were like a few shops open, I knew they were open, so I was able to go there and get my remote. But there was nobody there. The storefronts were closed. It was creepy as shit. Like no one was there. No one was out shopping. The parking lot was desolate. It felt like that movie. And like that's how much life changed for us on that day. So I think based on that, they got it right with the movie and the ending. Now maybe maybe we'll get to 28 years later and they're like, okay, you had your happy ending. Now let's see how the other side lives. So maybe that's what we're going to get in this movie. I don't know. But I'm just saying, like, I think you always have to judge everything of the time.
You really do, yeah. And at the end of the day, I mean, this thing stands the test of time. I think it's one of the defining movies of the 21st century.
100%. Let's get into some categories, Patrick, and let's kick things off as we do each and every week here on the show, and let's talk about best performance. And as I said earlier, this is an embarrassment of riches when you think about the talent that they managed to stack in this movie for what was at the time a whole bunch of unknowns. So, Patrick, when it comes to 28 Days Later, who gets your best performance?
My best performance, Damon, almost ends up going to Naomi Harris, who played Selena. I was having a tough time between the three major leads of like who I wanted to really pick, but I kept honing in on her and Donald Gleason. And ultimately I love the strength of that character. I love what she did with the character of Selena. I love the complexity of her and how she was already jaded by the world. And by the way, she came up she worked with Danny Boyle and Alex Garland to create a scenario for her character where her character had to kill her parents because her parents were infected because she was trying to save her brother from them. And then when she killed them, she turned around and she realized her brother was also infected. So she was living without any sort of hope. She had lost her family, which obviously were dearly important to her. And so with the character that you meet of Selena has no hope. She had to kill all of her hope, all of her dream, all of her love. She had to stamp all that out long before she met Jim. So she's jaded, and Jim helps her find it again. He helps her see it again. So she has this really interesting arc that moves through the movie. And I do think Naomi Harris, and she has gone on to do a lot of great things, but she really shined in this movie.
Yeah, she's great, and also she had a kick-ass haircut in this movie. I loved her haircut.
Yeah.
Very,
Yeah. Another
very,
punk, spiked hair, look cool.
yeah. So I'm gonna go a little off the cuff with my best performance because I'm not going with any of the four main cast. My best performance, and this is coming from rewatching it again recently, I give my best performance to Christopher Eccleston as Major Henry. Um, I'm a big I'm sorry, Major Henry West was actually his name, but Major Henry. I'm a big Christopher Eccleston fan. I'm actually not a Doctor Who fan, which I know is where a lot of people know him from, but like I've seen him in everything else he's done. I love Christopher Eccleston. He was just in the most recent season of True Detective, which we reviewed. He was great in that. He's great in everything. I mean, he's been in. He actually played in the remake of Gone in 60 Seconds, the one with Nicolas Cage. He's in that movie. I actually really like him in that movie. He's in Thor: The Dark World. He's in G.I. Joe. He's in. I mean, just tons of stuff, and he's great. He was in The Leftovers, which that's one of my all-time favorite TV shows. His ability to play a leader of men in this movie, and then to flip that switch into that chilling scene with Jim, that's what did it for me. When you can chill me to my bones, to my core with a line. And he's not screaming it. He's not, there's very little inflection in his voice. He says to Jim, I promised them women. That delivery and the way he delivered it. There's a million other actors out there who would have delivered a different way. And I'm not saying they would have been wrong, but they could have been like, I promised them women.
Yeah.
Just the way he delivered it in such a slow, calm, like he was basically saying to Jim, like, this is going to happen whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
I promised them women. And just the look on Jim's face, the haunting look of realization of what they actually stepped into. I was like, dude, you got my best performance.
Yeah, the coldness of that moment is what's so chilling about it. Not to be punny, but he's so cold about the idea. Like, and he knows he's stronger. He knows he's got more guns. He already knows what's going to go on. He doesn't need to put any bravado out there. He doesn't need to thump his chest. He knows it's all but written. He's like, yep, this is what's going to happen. And I think like it goes back to the viscerality of it all, where it's just you're put in Jim's shoes, where it's like, fuck, this guy doesn't care. He's not worried about me. He's not worried about us doing anything. He's just letting me know what he's about to do. And that is terrifying. That is absolutely chilling.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great performance. Patrick, let's move on to our next category, our MVP, our Ken Foray Banana Hammock. Ken Foray, of course, from the original Dawn of the Dead, by the way. Ken Foray Banana Hammock MVP Award, named after great character actor Ken Foray from the movie From Beyond, not Dawn of the Dead, where he jumped down a flight of stairs and into a basement to kill a creature wearing nothing more than a thong bikini. If that's not an MVP performance, tacked on to what he did in Dawn of the Dead, I don't know what is. So, Patrick, when it comes to the MVP of 28 Days Later, who gets your award?
Damon, my MVP goes to one of my absolute favorite directors working today and probably ever. That's Danny Boyle. It's a very bold movie. He made a lot of bold choices here. And by the way, the choice to shoot on DV probably saved the movie. And one of the producers mentioned this. He goes, the fact that we could just pick up 6 cameras and shoot a scene in a matter of minutes when we were out, closing down the streets of London to try and get these shots. He goes, it's the only way these shots got done. It's the only way this thing got done. And that's just one aspect, one great part of this movie. The themes of like isolation and then claustrophobia and togetherness, that's all visual craft. That's all saying we need to see just one lone car going down the M65 or the M4 or whatever, like we need to just see that happening and to feel its isolation. We need to get this shot over here. We need to get that shot. And he just builds a world so beautifully, yet so like crunchy and gritty and kind of worn down. It is the mark of like real artistic execution. and it doesn't come along very often. It's funny because like I think if I saw another movie made this way, I would go, "This movie sucks. Like it looks like shit." It takes a real vision to make something like this that is clearly standing the test of time. 23, 4 years later, however long it is, it stands the test of time, and it does it because Danny Boyle was able to synthesize the story into those visuals and to choose those actors to execute his emotional beats. This is directing not 101. This is directing 400 or whatever the advanced class is. You can't just give a camera to somebody and they'll churn this out. You gave it to Danny Boyle and he churned out an absolute classic.
He, of course, won the Oscar for Best Director for Slumdog Millionaire, which is a great movie. Do you have a favorite? If you take 28 Days Later out, I know I'm putting you on the spot here, Patrick. Do you have a favorite Danny Boyle movie besides 28 Days Later? Like another one that you love? Because he's done, I mean, just to, not to belabor the point, like when you talk about this guy's resume, but like it's a ridiculous resume. You think about, I'm just looking down the list here right now. Train Spotting, of course, everyone knows that. The Beach, 28 Days Later, Sunshine, Slumdog Millionaire, 127 Hours. He did Train Spotting 2 yesterday, and then of course he's doing 28 Years Later coming up in about a week's time here. So do you have a favorite Danny Boyle movie?
If it isn't 28 Days Later, it's probably Train Spotting, which is another one that just will absolutely bowl you over with how just gut-wrenchingly visceral it is. It's a movie that just absolutely sinks you into madness. And I've seen even like lesser movies of his, movies you didn't fire off there. Like he did one that was like kind of weird, like some weird erotic thriller. And I was like, this is still fucking funky and weird. And Danny Boyle, like he was supposed to do a Bond movie and they couldn't agree to the story. They wouldn't let his story guy write it. And I'm like, you guys fucked up. You should have let him do a Bond movie. It would have been amazing. But I think that ship has sailed. He's an incredible director. And I show up for everything he does. I can't wait.
Life Less Ordinary is another one of his films that I really enjoy.
Life Less Ordinary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say for me, it's actually Sunshine from 2007.
Sunshine, I love.
Also with, of course, Cillian Murphy. It's a science fiction movie about the sun is dying and these astronauts go to the sun to basically ignite a nuclear bomb to try to reignite the sun so the earth doesn't die. And it's a fucked up movie. It's a really good. I think Chris Evans is in that too, if I'm not mistaken. It's a very early Chris Evans movie. I saw Sunshine in the theater as well, but I love it.
I did too.
That's probably my favorite Danny Boyle. So my MVP. Now, Patrick, I know you're sitting there right now and you're saying, okay, go ahead, just give it to Alex Garland, right? That's what you're thinking, right? That's what you're thinking.
Usually that's where this ends up.
I love this script, and outside of a couple of movies, Men being one, I really do enjoy everything Alex Garland's done. But no, I'm not giving him my MVP. I'm giving my MVP to future Oscar winner Cillian Murphy.
Okay.
Early work of his, and those piercing blue eyes are still very much on screen here, even in the dark, damp
blue eyes.
This is one of those movies where you recognize talent. He's very early in his career. I think he had, like I said, like 3 or 4 IMDb credits going into this thing. And he's so good. From the fear he shows waking up in that hospital, to the tragedy of finding his dead parents, to the horror of that conversation with Major Henry, to him kind of turning himself into a bit of an action hero to save Selena and Hannah. He goes through a ringer in this movie. And there's a moment, I talk about that moment when he has that conversation with Major Henry where he says, the women. There's a moment later in this movie where he doesn't say a word. He just looks at the camera, and that's where I was talking about the close-ups. He's got blood streaming down his face. He's shirtless, and he just looks in the camera, and it's like this primal energy of like, I'm saving them. I don't care if I die. I'm saving these women. And he just looks like, you fuck with me right now, you're going to die. I'm going to rip you apart with my bare hands, and I don't have the rage virus. There's a look. I think you probably know the scene I'm talking about. It's a real close, intense scene. This is just one of those stroke of genius where you get a guy, like, I know this is terrible to bring up. We talk about Texas Chainsaw Massacre 4, and it's weirdly a movie that has Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger, who go on to have these incredible careers. when they talk about that movie, it's almost like, can we not talk about this movie? Like, we just, we can we just erase that from our mind? Like, we don't like to talk about. We're not proud of that achievement in our film careers. This is a movie that Cillian Murphy can look at even now as a winner for Oppenheimer and say, look at what I did. He's so good. And I think that, like, it elevates. And you don't know that going in. I think that's why he gets my MVP. You don't know that going in. I'm sure Danny Boyle recognized something in Cillian Murphy, and that's why he cast him, but you don't know. And the way he sells this movie, the way he leads this movie, he's brilliant. It's not the same movie without him.
It's not. And I think what I really like about his performance is the boyishness of it all, where he is really flailing like for most of the movie. And I think it's that the optimism of just not having been through the fucking through the hell of the last 28 days, where he's just like, there's got to be something, right? Like that, him being able to present that, I think made all the difference for what the movie ended up being. And and here we are, 2 decades later, and he's got an Oscar sitting at the desk at home because he's got what it takes.
Yeah, he's 100% great. Let's talk about Best Scare. This is very much a horror movie. To its core, it's a horror movie. What is your best scare in 28 Days Later?
I kept this one real simple. When he walks into that church, we talked about it earlier, and he shouts hello, looking for somebody, and those 2 people pop up out of the piles of bodies. It's not that they popped up. It's the looks on their faces. The looks on their faces are the faces not of zombies, but of like rabid chimps is what I saw. Like in those moments, it just looked like the kind of chimps who are like, I'm about to rip your face off. And you're like, oh, holy shit. Like, it's so unsettling. And I was like, is it a jump scare? No, it's not. It's just chilling. It's incredibly chilling. And that scene, when I saw it again for the first time in whatever 10, 15 years I've seen this movie, I was like, that's fucking scary.
That's the answer, by the way. That is the scariest scene. That's the one that still gets me to this day. But I'll give a different example. And this one also goes to Danny Boyle and the cinematographer, the way they shot this. When they're in Jim's parents' house and he's going around with the candle looking at the photos, and they have that really brilliant camera view where you see the point of view from the infected, and you see it shaking and running and just breaking through the window. I'm not saying it's like terrifying. It's just the way it's shot is like, oh shit. I love that shot. And you're a director, so you probably know more than I do, but the way he shot that from that point of view, the shaky point of view, and then crashing through the window and seeing the infected in that moment, it's so like just heart stopping.
Yeah. I mean, I think the camera work is dreadful. Like when it needs to be dreadful is really weird. Like the camera's too close sometimes to invoke that kind of terror, not being able to see around the corner or orient yourself to what's going on. And then to immediately snap into some sort of, quick movement. You're constantly like on your feet, on your toes with this movie. You can't relax with this movie. It constantly keeps you on edge. It has a lot to do with the direction and the camera work.
And you, as a director, are you impressed by that shot? Because I love that shot.
It's a shot. I'm like, why does this freak me out? It shouldn't. Like, again, in the wrong hands, that shot doesn't work. It works because Danny and his editor and his cinematographer and all those things that came together created just an incredibly dreadful, like, adrenaline fueled moment. And that's the thing is, like, this movie's like a cattle prod. It keeps shocking you. But it's in how it's actually structured. It took more than just shooting it. It's like they probably shot the POV of it running towards the window 3 different ways, and they were like, which is the way that works? I think it's that one. I think that's the one for maximum impact. That's the nuts and bolts of filmmaking. It's making those decisions constantly and just going, I think we play it like this, or try it like that, or do it like that, and then having all those options laying on the table, and then assembling them. And then acting like you intended to do it when you're on the Q&A panel. You're like, oh yeah, that's how we designed that. It's like, no, we fumbled our way through that shit and we found it. But also because he was shooting on DV tape, he was like, we could try it again. We can try it again. It's not going to cost us anything to hit record one more time. Let's go again and figure it out. And And then you have what you have. You have this movie that's absolutely indelible.
This is probably the worst question. If you got a chance to ask like Danny Boyle one question, there's so many better ones you could ask. But there's part of me that wants to know: is there like a B-reel out there of like a Jackass type scene where they just send the poor cameraman flailing through that window over and over again? Because it's the point of view. You're holding the camera and you crash through the window. I'm curious, like if there's like a Johnny Knoxville in the back, like, okay, do it again, Johnny. And he's running with the camera and he crashes through. We didn't get a good angle. Do it again, Johnny. Like I feel like there's got to be a Jackass reel of some poor guy just crashing through a window like 30 times to get that shot. I love it. I love it. Patrick, next category, best gore. There's a lot of blood in this movie. What is your best gore for 28 Days Later?
Mine is we're still in that church, Damon. I guess because being raised Catholic really did a number on me. But walking in the church in that first scene, and there's just the piles and piles of bodies. It's coupled with like the cinematography is grainy and rough, and the great production design and the great costuming and the great makeup and everything. There's something just so absolutely unsettling seeing like piles of bodies in a church. There's something about that just gets me, and I think it's not the goriest scene in the movie, but I could smell it. I could taste it. Like I was like, oh my God, like that, like what a heinous thing he walked in on. And so that one always gets me. I had to include it.
So my favorite is towards the end of the movie after Jim has unleashed the infected into the house with the soldiers. And there's that one soldier named Jones who is the cook, and he's the one who accidentally lets Jim get away because he shoots the sergeant, and then him and the other guy get in the argument. And he's out, he's hiding under the cabinet, and he gets out, and the infected jumps through, and it just pukes blood on him. And it's so disgusting. And the way, because he's kind of like the scaredy cat throughout the entire. You tell he's like the scaredy cat soldier. He's the most afraid soldier. And when he gets tackled, and that thing just jumps on top of him and goes, blood. It just spews blood on him. It is so gross and so nasty. And yeah, like I can't think of getting bitten and torn apart is pretty awful. But the fact that you just get your entire face covered in nasty, gross blood just seems like the least fun ever. And that scene just, every time I see it, I'm like, oh.
The blood puking in this movie is like super disgusting.
There's a lot of blood puking in this movie.
There's a lot.
A bonus category, before we get to Can We Survive This Horror Film, bonus category, fast zombies versus slow zombies. This is a very big debate in the zombie fan community. And again, these aren't actually zombies. They're infected people, but they're mindless creatures. They're not, they're not hanging out in the back reading and smoking a cigarette. Fast zombies or slow zombies, Patrick? Which way do you lean?
Damon, I think fast zombies are scarier. And I know some people go, no, the slow ones are scarier. They're just scarier. Come on, you have to run from them. If you have to like physically get up and fucking move your ass. If you're slow, you're fucked. You are so fucked. Like you have to fucking move your ass and get away from these things. I think that's the urgency and the terror is so much more immediate. But by the way, it's not like a hard fast rule for me. The slow zombies in Night of the Living Dead and the remake of Night of the Living Dead to me are terrifying zombies. They're scary. They're genuinely scary. For different reasons though. And so for me it's less about like trying to find the definitive answer and just going, what's the right tool for this moment? Some moments require slow zombies. Some moments require fast zombies. It's not a big deal. Relax. Everybody take a fucking chill pill. This was always such a huge discussion. And I'm like, it genuinely does not matter. It's when do you need the fast one or when do you need the slow one? That's it.
I understand when people are, you're already talking about, dead reanimated corpses coming back to life and you're trying to put logic into that. But the logic is a reanimated corpse with rigor mortis and everything, they would be slow. They wouldn't be moving fast. You don't have fast twitch muscles when you're dead. So I understand that argument if you're really trying to plug logic in. I get it. I do. But the fast moving zombies are far more terrifying. I think of Dawn of the Dead. I think of this movie. I think even of Zombieland, which is not really meant to be a scary movie. It's a comedy
Right.
movie. But even there, it's the fast moving zombies. They are scarier. And I think when you really drill it down to when you watch the movies with the slower moving zombies, like really what it comes down to in those movies is the sheer number of zombies. When it gets to be just like, there's like 1,000 zombies, I don't care how fast you're moving, if they're chasing you down, they're going to catch you and you're going to die a horrific death. But when you got one or two zombies and they're slow moving, you can get away from them, you can kill them, and so that sets up a different kind of plot. And I'm fine. I understand George Romero was very, 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 very adamant about slow moving zombies. He did not like Zack Snyder's fast moving zombies.
Yeah.
Me personally, I love George Romero. I lived in Pittsburgh for many years. I worship at the altar of George Romero. He is the father of the zombie. But I like the fast moving zombies. They are scarier. And every example of that, specifically with 28 Days Later, 28 Weeks Later, and coming up 28 years later, it's scarier. When they're running at you and you got to run away, it's a different reaction than when you can walk away.
Yeah, it really is, Damon. That rolls really well into our next category, doesn't it?
Our next category, can we survive this horror film? This is where you and I plug ourselves into whatever movie we are reviewing, and we say, could we make it out alive? Patrick, I'll go first here and say, the fuck no, I'm not surviving this. I'm a big dude. I'm 6'3", 260 some odd pounds. I ain't running shit. You are catching me. These rage zombies are catching me quick. Like I'm basically, I'm dead. I'm not even going to pretend otherwise. Like I may be able to take out a couple of them, but eventually they're going to catch up to me because I'm slow. I am not a fast dude, so I'm fucked.
And I'm in the exact same boat. I might get a few here or there. I might be able to run over a few with my SUV or something like that. But at the end of the day, if I'm on foot and I'm being chased by a couple of them, I'm not going to get out. Danny Boyle specifically hired ex-athletes to play the zombies because he wanted people that could move differently than your average person. He wanted to make sure that those people felt faster. They felt like they could outrun you and all that good stuff. Like I think of Gunnar Hansen and Leatherface. You know what's so terrifying about that movie is when Sally is running from him, he's like way faster than her. He's about 270 pounds and he's going way faster than her with a fucking chainsaw coming at her. It feels like that the same way in 28 Days Later, where you're just like, I can't outrun these things. They're going to be right on top of me. And so, yeah, I'm right there with you. I don't think I'm making it through this one.
Did you read the story? I can't remember if it was this one or the sequel. Did you read the story that James McAvoy tried to play one of the infected? Did you ever read that story? I read that somewhere. Mm-mm. Yeah, like early in his career, he tried to play one of the. I don't know if it's true or not. I just it's internet, so it may not be true. But I read that somewhere that he auditioned to be one of the. He didn't get it because I guess maybe he wasn't fast enough. But
if I see James this year at Comic-Con, I'll ask him. I could have asked him last year, but I didn't know that story.
Yeah, I just read it doing research, and it may be totally off base, but I read that somewhere, and I was like, that's interesting. And the timing kind of does work out. It's where he was famous, and he is, he's Scottish, so, yeah. Patrick, next category, what are we looking for from 28 years later? Now, as we record and release this podcast, it's coming out the week of the release of 28 years later, and we'll be reviewing 28 years later next week. So this podcast is going to drop literally like 2 days before the new film comes out. And to be totally clear, you and I have not seen it yet. Sorry, I wish Sony had sent us some screeners. We did not get screeners, so we have not seen this movie yet. But the trailers are out there, and the premise, not exactly rocket science. It's 28 years later. So what are you hoping for from this movie?
What I'm hoping for from this movie is more of Danny Boyle's visual innovation and more of Alex Garland's societal commentary. Lately, Civil War, warfare, and even some of Alex's TV shows, they have a lot to say about society. A lot. A lot has happened between the finishing of the film back in 2001 or 2 and what is going on now. There's so much to talk about. There's so much that there is to say, and I hope it's completely embedded in this movie. I hope they don't worry too much about connecting the universe, and like how does Jim and Selena tie into all of this? I don't really care. What I care is that what the commentary that Danny and Alex put together for 28 Days Later follows them into 28 years later. That's what I'm really hoping, is that you get a commentary on what's going on. There's a lot going on in the world, not just here in America, not just here, because there's obviously a lot of things we could talk about that are just happening right here in America. There's stuff happening all over the planet, and a lot of people have a lot of concerns, and a lot of people are suffering. What do Alex Garland and Danny Boyle have to say now, 23 or whatever years later? What do they have to say about society through the world that they created?
I 110% agree with you. The societal collapse in 28 Days Later, and we mentioned it earlier, like to see all this happen within 28 days, how much society just falls on its head, and how far we fall from humanity in these moments. When the lights aren't turning on and there's no 911, the police aren't coming. Um, So and I said I don't want to repeat it, but I want to say, like we talked about of that time in 2001, 2002, 9/11 changing the world, and the hopelessness being turned into hope by the end of 28 Days Later. We both kind of agreed they needed that ending. It was a better ending the way it ended, with Jim making it and not dying. This movie, I'm not saying I need a dour, sad ending or anything like that, but I want it to reflect the time. Now, this is still fantasy, and it's 28 years, so I guess technically it's going to be 2030 in the movie, so 5 years later than now, I guess, is the timeline we're talking about here. So there's still some fantasy in there, but I want it to reflect the time of what they're going for. When you watch Civil War, which I love, by the way, I love that movie.
Good movie.
You know there's an American Civil War, and there's Texas and California, and then the eastern states. You kind of get a little bit of the geographical definition, but you never, ever learn in that movie what caused the Civil War. Sorry, I'm sorry I'm spoiling that movie, but and by the way, that's not a spoiler. You don't need to know that. It has no effect on the movie when I say that, by the way. They're not the purpose of that movie is not to tell you what broke out the Civil War. It's what happens when civil war happens. Like, what does the world become when a country is collapsing on itself in war? That's the story. It's not about, oh, it was this, this murder, this execution, this assassination. No, that doesn't matter. It's the story what happens when a country turns against itself. That's what I want to see in this. What happens 28 years later? Like, have we learned nothing? Did we learn anything in these 28 years later to be better people, to be worse people? What does this world look like? And we saw what it looked like 28 days later. And I'll be honest, I have not rewatched 28 Weeks Later in a long, long time. But I do remember liking that movie. Like, Rose Byrne is in it. Jeremy Renner's in it. I remember liking the movie. I saw it in the theater, and I know I saw it like once or twice at home. Haven't seen it since then. So it's been 20 years probably since I've seen 28 Weeks Later. But I do remember liking that movie. So this is a strong setup. 28 Days Later was incredible. 28 Weeks Later, I know I remember liking it. And this movie. So I'm with you 110%. What do we have to say about the world now? What have we learned? Have we gotten better? Have we gotten worse? That's what I want to know. And that's the world I'm looking to get a glimpse in this movie.
Damon, you're a glorified art goon, aren't you? It's happened.
I am.
You have fully turned into an art goon. I blame myself and I celebrate myself all at once.
You are a horrible yet awful yet amazing influence. Horrible but yet amazing influence. Patrick, last category is always, is it scary? I think this is a pretty simple answer. 28 Days Later, is it scary?
It scared the shit out of me back then, but with just its viscerality, just it's coming at you in your face. Now, 20 something years later, what I feel is it's just drenched in dread. It's absolutely drenched in panic and anxiety and unease. This is a very, 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 very visceral movie, and I think, like, however you want to slice it, is it going to keep you up at night? It might, for reasons that aren't so obvious, actually. For other reasons than just, oh, scary fast zombies. No, like, for other reasons, like, what does it mean for humanity and all that stuff? It has a lot to say, and I think it lingers with you far, far after it's done. It's to me, this movie's terrifying.
No better word. I was literally getting ready to say this movie is fucking terrifying in a lot of different ways. From the zombies to the moment when Mark gets infected and he's like, no, and Selena just starts hacking him to death with a machete. The scenes of the chase scenes, the blood in the eye with Frank, the soldiers, the atrocity of we promised them women. Just this entire movie from start to finish is a relentless, tension-filled, butthole puckering experience. Like, that's exactly what this is. It is that from start to finish. And there's layers to it. Like I say, are you scared of the zombies? Are you scared of the humans? Are you scared of when they're running? Are you scared of when they're trying to find safety? Are you what? There's so many things to be afraid of in this movie that you cannot say this is not a terrifying movie. So it absolutely is. And by the way, while the experience was different, because I know I've seen this movie at this point a dozen times, it still works. I wasn't sitting on the edge of my seat and I didn't have nightmares because I've seen this a dozen times, but it still works. Like, I was like, ooh, God, here it comes. And as I said, even that moment with the line from the Major, that hit me different now than it did back then. Like, I knew the story back then, but even now I'm like, oh my God, it's so dark. This movie's terrifying. You described it perfectly. It is a fucking terrifying movie.
Yeah, I'm so glad we rewatched it. It was a great idea from the great Damon Martin saying, we should do that before 28 years later comes out. So glad we did. So glad we revisited this absolute classic.
100%. Well, that is our next episode. So if you are going to see 28 years later, that is going to be our very next episode. So stay tuned for that. I'm legit excited to see that in the theater. I can't wait. As always, want to say a big thank you to everyone that tunes into the podcast. Make sure you check us out on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and of course over on our YouTube channel, just search Rewind of the Living Dead. Even if you don't watch us there, that's fine. But like and subscribe, it really does help us with search results and the algorithm and the world of the internet as it works. Do that. Also, find us on social media. We are on Twitter/X. We are still on Elon's Playground. We are on Facebook, and we are on Instagram. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead. You'll find us over there. We post clips, we post news, we post graphics, post all kinds of cool shit. So find us and like us over there. And also,
TikTok. Don't forget TikTok, Damon.
We are on TikTok. You have a much bigger following over there than I do, but we are on TikTok. What is your TikTok name?
Patrick of the Living Dead, and you're Damon of the Dead, right?
Damon of the Dead, yes, Damon of the Dead over there. So so you can find us on TikTok as well, which is where I'm still trying to catch up to Patrick and following over there. Follow us over there, and if you got questions, comments, movies you'd like us to review, do you remember your experience with 28 Days Later in the theater or when you first saw it? Send us a message. rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That's rot. livingdead@gmail.com, or send us messages on our social media channels. As I said, just search Rewind of the Living Dead on Twitter, on Facebook, or on Instagram, or you can find us on our own personal social media channels. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And a big thank you, as always, for everyone that tunes in. We'll be back next week with another edition of Rewind of the Living Dead. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you then.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.